Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Gaffer Gear. Today we're going to be reviewing the Luxli Timpanis, which are a 1x1 LED panel that packs a lot of features. Color tunable from 2,800 degrees Kelvin to 10,000 degrees Kelvin with plus and minus green. They have a full HSI mode, 150 built-in gels, and they can operate via a mobile phone. Okay, so let's start off the review by talking about the build quality. The build quality is absolutely exceptional. It is all aluminium. So why is it metal? Well, probably not to do with making a strong LED. More probably to do with the fact that it's a 120 watt LED array. So that big array needs a big heat sink to distribute the heat, which is most likely why it's a metal fixture. Now, looking at the fixture straight off the bat, the one thing I really hate about this unit, and really is the only big negative, is these lock-offs. Now, a lot of reviewers have said that these lock-offs are awesome, they're all metal, they look stylish, they are absolutely not practical if you're running a big battery, which you will be because it's a 120 watt LED. So the big problem I found is these lock-offs tend to jam, and because they're quite small, they're very hard to unlock and unlever. Now let's have a look at this thing in CCT mode, and you're going to see why I'm very impressed with these units. Okay, so you can color tune it from 2,800 degrees Kelvin in 50 degree increments all the way up to 10,000 degrees Kelvin. Now, to speed things up when you're using it, the buttons depress, and when you depress them, they go to presets. So you depress once, it goes to 3,200 degrees Kelvin. Depress it a second time, it goes to 5,600 degrees Kelvin. So let's get it back to 3,200. Now you also have 4 buttons here next to the display. On the display indicates what the button does. So in CCT mode here, we have on the next button down, plus or minus green. So this unit actually has plus or minus green for matching location lighting. Now on the other side of the console is your dimmer knob, and as you'd expect, it dims in 1% increments. Now one thing that's really cool about this is it also depresses. If you depress it once, it goes to 0. If you press it again, it goes back to what your last setting was. So that saves you from having to turn the unit on and off to save batteries. Now in all the modes, you can access the menu button. And once you've accessed the menu button, you get a choice of options. Preset is the top option, so you can select that. Now you can save up to 4 presets. Now the only criticism I have of the preset menu is that when you save something into one of the presets, I'm just going to save into preset A. It asks if I want to confirm. Yes, I do. Once I save into preset A, there's nothing there on the display to indicate what settings are actually saved there. So that's the only criticism I've got. On most other lights, you would have something come up on the display saying what the color temperature is, something like that. That would be really handy. That's a minor criticism, and I'm sure they'll fix it up in the next firmware. Okay, let's have a look at the next mode. Now to change the light modes, you just press the mode button, and the next mode is hue, saturation and intensity. So on the side here, you just press the button that relates to what you want to change. So let's have a look at saturation first. So I just press saturation, and now the knob adjusts the saturation level. And as you can see there on the display, the crosshairs indicate where you are in terms of color. Now I want to adjust my hue, just press the hue button and off we go. So really straightforward, simple and intuitive to use. Now the next mode is gels mode, and this mode is staggering for the price of the unit. Check this out. You can actually select your base color temperature. At the moment the light is at 5,600, so let's get it down to 32. Now you can select a color temperature anywhere between 2,800 degrees Kelvin to 10,000 degrees Kelvin and then add your gel. Okay, so let's now go to the gels mode. Now there are 150 gels pre-programmed into this unit. Actually there's 149 because gel number 150 is clear, which I don't really count as a gel. Now one thing that's really funky for you corporate video guys is gels number 1 and 2 are chroma key blue and chroma key green. I've already used this on chroma key jobs. Now, it's a very simple menu to scroll through, very straightforward. You can see the name of the gel and you can see the color of the gel coming up on the menu. So at the moment we're getting into red, so we can select the red that we want. Very simple. Or we say we want a pink, we can scroll back to where there's pinks on the menus and select the pink that we want. Incredibly simple to use. Now the next mode is special effects mode, and I've currently got it in color chase. Now to change your modes, you scroll down. So let's have a look at, say, fire. So I scroll down to fire selected. I press stop to stop the previous mode, and then I press play to start the next mode. Now in all the modes you can go into the menus and make adjustments, so you can adjust the flicker rates, things like that. Now I'm going to exercise a word of caution here. Now this is version 1 of the firmware, and Luxli are fairly new players to this game, so they haven't got a few things sorted out just yet. And one thing they haven't got sorted out is having their effects so that they are friendly with camera shutters. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. So let's stop this effect, scroll down till we get to police lights, which I think they call siren. Where's that siren? And let's play that. And as you can see, that plays hell with the camera shutter. Now this unit can be controlled via DMX or over Bluetooth using a phone app. So I want to show you the phone app, but here's my problem. My phone is my camera. So I'm going to use my iPad to film the next segment, so please excuse the change in quality. Okay, so welcome to my workshop. There's the Luxli and there's my phone. So let's select, oh, it's very awkward doing this. Let's select the app. Okay, Luxli Conductor. Okay, now it has already found the device. So we can dial in a color temperature. So let's go 3,200 degrees Kelvin. Done. Okay, now we've selected our color temperature. Do we want to use a filter? Yes. Okay, and there's our gels library. Check this out. How simple is that to use? Now, let's say you want to use a color wheel. Well, we can press the white button, and now we've got our color selector. Have a look at that. How simple is that? And straightforward. Now the app also has an RGB mode, so you can dial in RGB values. Now the Timpani units are a direct LED array. So what I mean by that is all of the LEDs face the front. They don't go through a diffuser. Now I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't like having the multiple shadows, particularly when you're trying to cut the light. You get, if you've got a barn door, for example, you get multiple cuts off the barn door. It's called shadow echo, and I hate it. I much prefer having a soft light option. Now, the guys at Luxli aren't manufacturing any softbox accessories for this. They told me that why bother when you can buy one of these, which they put me onto. This is made by Angler. So this is just a pop-out little softbox that uses magnets to go together. Gives you a nice little softbox. Now I'm back to one unit. It also, or back to one light source, it also has a soft grid on it. So this is about 60 bucks. So this really is worth having as an option with your Luxlis, because you've got the power of the direct light when you need the power, but when you need the one shadow source, you can pop one of these on the front and also get some control. Now the good thing about these boxes, apart from being cheap, is if you're going to use them a fair bit, you don't have to take them off the light. You can just collapse it for transport. Now one thing I'm not a huge fan of with this unit is how the LEDs are orientated. In most lights the LEDs are orientated in a checkerboard formation. These guys have got them orientated into strips. So as you change your colours, you can see one set of strips turns on and the other set of strips turns off. The problem I have with having strips is when you get to a scenario like this, where you've got lights illuminated and then a row of lights off, then a row of lights illuminated, it really does increase the shadow echo. Okay, so now getting into the negatives, and I don't really have a lot. So my first negative that I already mentioned was the lock-offs. I can't stand them. they're pretty terrible. But the one good thing with the lock-offs is they jam, they don't go loose. So you can set this up above your set, lock it into position. It will stay there all day, unlike a lot of lights that we use. This thing will lock in place. It's just the unlocking it that's not so great. Now, there is a firmware problem with the battery maintenance, and it is a major issue if you're thinking about using these for live broadcasts. I would not dare, with this version of the firmware, try to use one of these lights on a live broadcast. The problem is it misdiagnoses a flat battery. So the unit will turn off, tell you that the battery's flat and the battery's fully charged. Now, to give you an idea of how often this happens, if I'm using these on set, and let's say I'm using them, say, 6 hours of the day, that might happen twice. So it's not a big deal, it's not a showstopper, but it is something to be aware of and be cautious of, particularly if you're doing anything live. Now, that's not me, so that doesn't really affect me all that much. The next negative to these units, which is a firmware thing and I don't like, is when the battery does go flat, instead of turning off, the unit stays on and the dimmer goes to 0. Now, the problem with this is when you change your battery, 0 is stored as your last setting, so you've lost your setting. So that's something to be aware of. It's not the end of the world. You can store your settings, but it is a minor inconvenience. But once again, it is firmware. I'm sure they will sort that out. There is one other glitch in the firmware. About 1 in 7 times that you turn the units on, you'll just end up with a white screen here. Basically, it crashed on boot up. If that happens, just disconnect the power, reconnect it, press the power button, and it'll fire up again. So pretty much, it's your usual version 1 firmware problems with the lights. Okay, so let's wrap up the review by getting into the stats. Now, if you've been impressed with what they can do so far, you're going to be blown away with the stats, especially considering how cheap these units are. So these are about $1,600 Australian by the time you land it here, and they're about 1,000 US. In terms of color temperature accuracy, so dialing in a color temperature, do you get what you dialed in? Yes, you do, to within a tolerance of 50 degrees Kelvin. So that's right across the range from 2,800 degrees Kelvin up to 10,000 degrees Kelvin. You're looking at a tolerance of 50 degrees Kelvin, which is quite accurate. Now, in terms of how these things are rendering their whites, these units are definitely using the RGB array to help remove any imperfections. So in terms of DUV scores, I'm going to measure these units with DUV scores. I'm not going to measure them using a gels targeting test because these units do not need any gel correction at any point at any color balance. They are super accurate. So at 2,800 degrees Kelvin, these units are 4 increments out. At 3,200 degrees Kelvin, these units are 2 increments of adjustment out, which makes them more accurate than a Gemini. In your mid-whites, which is 4,300 degrees Kelvin, these units are only 2 increments of adjustment out, which makes them about as accurate as a sky panel. Now, in your cool whites, 5,600 degrees Kelvin, these units are 6 increments of adjustment out, which means they're generating whites more accurately than a sky panel or a Gemini. The most these were off the Planckian curve was 6 increments of adjustment using X, Y coordinate value. Now, to give you some idea of what that actually means, if you try to correct it with gel, you would need a gel that is 1/4 the strength, 1/4 the strength of the weakest correction gel there currently is. Now, in terms of color rendering, right at the bottom of the scale, 2,800 degrees Kelvin, which is the lowest they can go, they actually perform relatively poorly. So the TLCI score is 66. However, TM30 color vector testing reveals that a more accurate score would be 84.3% color rendering with a 104% saturation. That sounds disappointing? Well, this is going to blow you away. 3,200 degrees Kelvin and higher, these things out-render the RE Sky panel and they out-render the Gemini. In your warm whites, these units are scoring a TLCI of 98.4. TM30 color vector testing reveals a more accurate score would be 94.9. Now 94.9 is the highest color rendering score that I have come across on any LED to date. In the mid-whites, these units have a TLCI score of 98.6%. TM30 color score is 93.2% color rendering with a 101.3% saturation. In your cool whites, these units are scoring around 97.3 TLCI with a TM30 color vector score of 92% for color rendering and 100.6 for saturation. So what does all that mean? Well, it means they're incredibly accurate. In fact, when I was testing these against the sky panels, I found that if I dialed a gel into these and dialed a matching gel into the sky panel, they matched perfectly. I also found that when I dial in a hue and saturation setting on a sky panel and dial the same numbers into these units, they also match up. So if you own sky panels and you're looking for something to complement them, something that's a mini sky panel, that's easy to rig, that you can stick out on a boom arm or a C-stand arm, these are the units. However, having said that, remember it's 3 kilograms. So that's without the battery. So what I would suggest is what I've done here. Use a 4-pin extension lead to a D-tap adapter and get the battery off the unit to help with the weight. So in summary, Luxli have come a long way since the Viola, which was just over a year ago. These units are amazing, and to be comparing them to sky panels and Geminis must be a real compliment to them, seeing as these things are about a quarter the price. I'm very, very impressed with them. I'm debating whether to buy a third one. I'll see how demand goes for these units. But basically, they're my new mini sky panel, and you're going to see them on set. I'm Andrew Locke. Thanks for watching Gaffer Gear. Don't forget to click subscribe, like or follow, depending on what platform you're on. And look, please share these videos. Feel free to share them at any time. I'm Andrew Locke. Take care. See you on set.